So, quite often, I'm asked if people from North Africa are black. The short and sweet answer is some of them are and some of them aren't. I know some people are going to say, actually, wait, North Africans are Arabs. But when we're speaking on black or white, we're talking about races. Arabic, however, is not a race, it's a culture. You have an Arabic language, Arabic food, Arabic music, Arabic clothing, and Arabic traditions, Arabic art. And as I always say, if you can eat it or speak it, then it's not a race. There are black Arabs or Afro Arabs, white Arabs, mixed Arabs, multi generationally mixed Arabs, and so on and so on. Also, not all North Africans identify with the Arabic culture. So, other than it not being a race, it's also not correct to identify different groups of people from around seven or more or so countries as one cultural group, as there are many different ethnic or tribal groups in North Africa, such as Berber, or more correctly, Imazian or Amazigh, Tuaregs, Fulani, Gadala, Sanhaja, Zanaga, Huwara, Kabyles, Mozabites, Nufusis, Rifian, and there's many, many more, and I'm pretty sure I butchered all their names. Anyway, my apologies. Many North Africans state that they don't connect with race, but instead identify with their culture or their religion as well as their ethnic group. Okay, so what race are they? Well, that's not a simple question. It's the same as saying what race are Americans of today. There's many races in America. Some people are black, some are white, Native American, Asian, and some are mixed. But if we're talking about the original North Africans, well, that's where it gets really interesting, and I'll try to help you understand this topic a little more. A long time ago, I was reading an article that said the majority of North Africans are in fact Caucasian and are more closely related to Europeans than Sub-Saharan Africans. Sub-Saharan Africa is the area of the continent that lies south of the Sahara. So they were basically saying North Africans are more white than they are black. Now, in the information age that we live in, and the growing popularity of ethnicity DNA tests and haplogroup testing, haplogroups are groups of people who share ancient origins. You can trace family lines through haplogroups. And also because our ancestors didn't move around nearly as often or as far as we do today, many haplogroups can be traced to a certain region of the world. In other cases, we can trace how a haplogroup migrated over time. But ethnicity DNA testing is very popular now. And at your fingertips, you can simply search a nationality or ethnicity along with the words DNA results and see what region of the world they are closely linked to and what group of people they're connected to. I got really interested in North African DNA results for one main reason. When we think of African people, we think of black people. So when you see non-black looking people, as in the case of some North Africans, you wouldn't be completely wrong to assume that they might look white due to thousands and hundreds of years of mixing with other groups. For example, the Coptic peoples, the Ottoman Empire, the Romans, the French, the Spaniards, and many more. So my understanding was that North Africans were all originally black. But due to years of conquests, invasions, migrations, and mixing, some became multi-generationally mixed. Some were closer to European, and some remained black. But it's actually a lot deeper than that. If we use a Hispanic person, for example, most of you by now will understand that Hispanic is not a race, it's a culture, because you can be a white Hispanic, you can be a black Hispanic, you can be a Native American Hispanic, and you can be a Hispanic who is mixed of a multitude of races. So let's say you have a Dominican person who takes a DNA test, and his results, for example, are 68% West African, 22% European, and 10% Native American. Most people will say, hey, that's black. And those results would kind of link to the Caribbean and transatlantic slave trade story. One could assume that his ancestors came from West Africa, were enslaved by Europeans, and also mixed with some of the indigenous natives of the Dominican island. That would be a pretty safe assumption. So maybe the white or mixed looking North Africans have a similar story. So I saw DNA result videos for different ethnic groups of North Africans. But something always confused me. They always had large amounts of North African DNA. For example, one could be 70% North African, 5% West African, 15% European, and 10% Middle Eastern. And their skin would be lily white. Their features would appear European or Mediterranean, hair completely straight. But when I would look at DNA results of someone who was North African but their skin was darker or their hair was curlier, they would have similar results, but the percentages would be different. Their percentage of West African or Sub-Saharan African DNA would be a lot higher. They would have more Senegalese, Malian, or Mauritanian DNA. And their North African DNA, although still high, would be a lot less. So this confused me because I was like, although a higher percentage of African DNA doesn't mean you'll be dark skinned, but in many cases it would play a role. But how could you be 80% African and look 100% white? The answer was in the ethnic DNA group label. The DNA results were making a distinction between North African and Sub-Saharan African DNA. In some results, it would say 80% North African, 10% Senegalese, 5% Mali. Now, over the last few years, I've been studying Native American migration and DNA. A lot of people don't know that Native Americans are a subcategory of the Mongoloid race. Native American isn't actually a race. It's a subgroup of the Mongoloid race. Mongoloid is a grouping of various peoples indigenous to East Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, North Asia, and the Americas. On some DNA results, you'll see it say Native American / Asian. But the DNA tests can differentiate between Asian DNA and Native American DNA because Native Americans have become their own distinct group due to migration from Asia over 15,000 years ago. There was also another migration of Native Americans known as Population Y, which started in Africa, went into Australia, across all of the Polynesian islands, and into the Americas. This was the darker skinned, thick curly-haired Native Americans. So these were two different migration patterns. This is why there are different descriptions of Native Americans, some being your yellow or red-skinned Native Americans, and some being your copper, dark-skinned, curly-haired Native Americans. But in DNA results, the darker-skinned or curly-haired Native Americans show up as Polynesian or Melanesian. But that's a whole different video for a whole different day. But the importance of the Native American and Asian distinction is what's relevant here. The reason the DNA results from North Africans make a distinction between North and Sub-Saharan African is due to a migration from Western Eurasia over 12,000 years ago. Genetic data from present-day populations suggests that North African ancestry has contributions from four main sources: Eurasian from over 12,000 years ago, a Middle Eastern component probably based on the Arab conquest, a Sub-Saharan component derived from trans-Saharan migrations, and a European component that's been linked to recent historic movements, like Greek, Roman, Spaniard, and French invasions. But are those particular types of North Africans the indigenous or original or first inhabitants of North Africa? Long story short, the answer is no. As I said, there are black as well as white and multi-generationally mixed North Africans. The purpose of this video was to break down whether North Africans were black or not. But once you address that the white or Caucasian featured North Africans are originally from Eurasia, although they've been in North Africa for over 12,000 years, who was in North Africa first, the Western Eurasians or Black Africans? So this is a case of intercontinental versus extracontinental migration. The white North Africans migrated from outside of Africa into North Africa, extracontinental or outer continental migration. So does that make them indigenous? The term indigenous is defined as naturally existing in a place or country rather than arriving from another place, or existing naturally or having always lived in a particular place. Or you could say the Aboriginal people, which would mean the first inhabitants of a place or region. You first need to understand that the original features of Africa were black. I've explained why and how the non-black North Africans came to be in Africa, and this is proven by their haplogroup, DNA, and historical migration patterns. Around 1300 BC, so over 3,000 years ago, a small amount of white people were described in Libya. But according to Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese historian, around 1200 BC, under the rule of Ramses III, a large population of Eurasian invaders were pushed back from Egypt into Libya. At that time in Libya, there was a group of people known as the Tenahus or the Libus, who were black people living in Libya. These are the ancestors of the Libus in Senegal today. You have Carthage, which is modern-day Tunisia, which was described by the Romans and Greeks as being a nation of black people. When the Romans took the Maghreb region after their war against Hannibal, they found so many black people in Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. They called these people Moors and called that part of North Africa Mauritania. The word Moros in Greek and Latin means black strictly, and Mauritania meaning black people country. So even by many historical testimonies, North Africa was indeed originally black. The Romans also described the presence of dark-skinned, scarred, and painted faces wearing braids. There were also migrations of Ethiopians into Tunisia. The Romans called these peoples the Barbari due to their so-called savage ways. But when the Arabs entered North Africa, they changed the word from Barbary to Berber, regardless of color or race. I also want to note that the term Berber has also been frowned upon as an offensive term because it links to the word barbarian. So it's quite evident that the original inhabitants of North Africa were indeed black. This was intercontinental migration from different parts of Africa. Due to many wars and invasions, many of the original black North Africans were forced south. This is why you will generally find darker-skinned North Africans at the southern regions of all North African countries. You'll also find tribes that originated in North Africa in parts of West Africa and East Africa. For example, the original Egyptians or the Nilotic people, who were indeed black, migrated south out of Egypt. Their descendants can be found in the Nubian Valley, Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, and many more. Whereas the North Africans of Western Eurasian descent were mainly found by the coast. These different ethnic and racial groups within North Africa intermixed and shared their tribal cultures. In some cases, they became one, but in some cases, the Eurasian North Africans took over the original North Africans' identity and culture. So yes, some North Africans are white, some are black, and some are multi-generationally mixed. Culturally, they have Arabic, Islamic, and Amazigh group roots, as well as many other cultures. And other than looking at a particular North African and saying, because you're dark-skinned, you're one of the originals, or because you're very fair or you look European, your ancestors may have migrated from Western Eurasia, the best way to know would be if they took DNA tests. That would tell them exactly where they started from. So as I said, if their DNA results say North African, this is a distinction that has been made for people whose ancestors migrated from Western Eurasia into North Africa, so not necessarily original peoples. So the question I want to pose to you guys in the comment section is, in your opinion, are the white or Caucasian North Africans, bearing in mind they migrated from Western Eurasia, are they indigenous to North Africa? Can they claim Africa as indigenous peoples even though they migrated from outside of Africa over 12,000 years ago, just like the Mongoloid Native Americans migrated from outside of America from Asia? Please bear in mind, this is a basic breakdown to get you started in doing your own research, but I suggest you check out any books by Sheikh Anta Diop. It'll help you a lot in your journey. Anyway, peace, love, and coconut oil. Hey man, that's racist! Please remember that from now on, brand new never before seen videos, as well as live streams, will only be available on my website, ikyg.com, via a Patreon subscription. ikyg.com is a Black-owned, Black-ran platform, 100% free from censorship. It's the only place where we don't have to worry about what we say and expressing ourselves. Make sure you check out the description and the comment section for important links, as well as information in video form that shows you what benefits you get when you support the site and join my Patreon. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe and be notified every time I upload a video. For exclusive content and perks, check out my Patreon. This is where we have private live streams, group chats, live Q&As, live phone calls, and open topics. This is a safe space where you can interact with other like-minded people, make friends, send each other direct private messages, and so much more without any trolls. And yes, you get to use GIFs and images in the live chats. So what are you waiting for? This is a completely independent website, free from censorship. If you'd like to make a donation towards the site so we can continue to put out the truth without fear of being silenced, then please hit that donation button. It's greatly appreciated. Check out the rest of the site for videos, private and public live streams, find out all the tea, and make sure to utilize the Black Money section of the website. Advertise your business absolutely free to people that look like you, free forever. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at angel_IKYG.